guys, welcome to Cussing in Cars. It's Mike Fernandez. This is our first video so far, so welcome. I'm on my way in the R8 V10. There you go. It's got stock exhaust right now, but we are getting ready to strap on the new Fabspeed exhaust. It's got a valve controller in it, so it should be fucking ripping when the straight dumps are open. Whoop, driving through the shitty San Francisco roads right now. Nice gated shifter, you can probably hear that clinking around. So yeah, I wanted to do an exhaust video as one of my first videos, and then we can get into more of some of the differences about the R8 versus some of my past cars, like the BMW M4 most recently. I was running downpipes on that and a tune, and that thing was ridiculous. Definitely a lot quicker than this thing on the highway. From a launch, this is probably the fastest car I've owned, but it's lacking in the torque department, figuratively speaking, with about 400 foot-pounds stock. So I also have had a C6 Z06 Corvette in the past, also right around 500 foot-pounds of torque, that had an intake exhaust and a tune as well, some coilovers and whatnot. So that was putting probably about 550 horsepower at the crank. When the BMW M4 was done being tuned and all that, it was probably putting down similar figures, right around probably 490 wheel, 500 wheel horse, and similar foot-pounds of torque. So those things I would say are faster than the R8 on the highway. Definitely the torque surge is just nuts, especially from the turbos. Also the R8, even though it's a supercar and seems awesome, is not the lightest car out there at a little over 3,600 pounds, partially due to the all-wheel drive and some of the materials, but obviously still a quick car. This motor is ridiculous. The V10 is probably one of the most buttery smooth things I've ever laid witness to, thankfully. Coming up to a tunnel in just a second, so I'll give you a taste of that. But really the reason I'm switching to the exhaust, this car sounds great out of the factory, it's just too quiet. Other owners will probably tell you that, so I really want to wake this thing up. It's got a Lambo V10 in the back, so it should sound like a Lambo, right? So here we go. Probably going to get a lot of wind noise, but let's see if we can get some engine noise. A little taste for you. Probably can't really hear it because of the wind noise, and that's one of the things. When you're driving the car, you get a little taste of the engine, and that's pretty much it. And the engine, again, sounds great, it's just not very loud. So I ideally would like to have something that's screaming, and I would be very content. So looking forward to strapping this thing on. We'll do some outside car stuff once it's in there, just to compare versus stock. So how is this thing versus some of the other cars I've had? Well, let's talk about things I'm not such a fan of right now. Steering's great in this car, but it's not amazing. I much preferred the M4, even though it was electronic. It was able to switch between light and heavy, and I thought I liked a little bit heavier steering. At low speeds, this car feels pretty good, but when you start going faster, it seems to lighten up a bit, which I wish was not the case. Also, the seats in this car, while comfortable and great for a road trip, I tested them out on the long drive after purchasing this car way out in Arizona. I drove it all the way back to San Francisco, which was about 800 miles. They're comfortable, but they are not the best for holding you in place in terms of lateral support. And they kind of also feel like a weird little clam, almost, in a sense. They kind of cup you front and back a little bit. You can't really change that angle a whole lot, which sorry, I'm trying to merge onto the Golden Gate Bridge right now. But yeah, so they're not the most comfortable, and they're not the sportiest either, but they're decent all around. The M4 had great seats. I think they could have used a little bit more side bolstering, but for the most part, definitely very, very sporty. Kept you in place. There was no Alcantara or any like micro suede, so leather tends to get a little slippery when you're on the track. But overall, those seats were great. Definitely, they looked stellar. And my Corvette, obviously the stock seats are pieces of shit. Most people know that. It's like sitting on a little kind of weird puffy cushion. It's really, really tiny. It's a really small seat. For as wide as the car is, the spots for where the seats go are very, very narrow. So I actually got some Corbeau seats put in there. They were not too expensive, and they did a great job. Plus, I was able to keep the reclining feature, which I thought I would want, and turns out I probably should have been better off with a fixed seat. But they were great for on the track. They had micro suede all around them, so it really kept me in place. But yeah, so these seats, not amazing, but they'll get the job done. I don't plan to do any more than probably 2 track days a year in this. But overall, really love the cabin. The shifter is gated 6-speed. It's fucking badass. It's not the greatest feel of shifting ever. I actually like my 370Z probably more than this. It's very mechanical, and I loved how it felt. BMW was a little rubbery, but it was actually pretty great overall. A little long of a throw, but takes some getting used to it. I liked it. Nothing really compares to Porsche. I think Porsche has the best shifting feel of all time. My Z06 had a short throw shifter that was kind of hard to muscle around. It was aftermarket, but that thing was pretty solid too. I still think Porsche has nailed it the most. Never owned a 911 or a Cayman, but I've looked at both, and definitely think they have the best shifter feel of all time. Plus, they have the best shift design knob. This one's kind of square on top, which is not the most comfortable to hold, but still works. But nothing is like the fucking metal gated shifter that you're just throwing, banging through the gears. Let's see, we're about to do a little hill climb. Maybe you'll hear some of the clinks. It feels kind of like you're breaking something at first because you're slapping through them. But it's definitely very rewarding to have. I would not want it any other way, especially with the older model. This is a 2012 R8. They had the R-tronic transmission, which was kind of not the greatest thing out there. It wasn't an actual proper dual clutch, and it was kind of slow. I had the fortunate opportunity to drive a 2014 V8 R8 a while back, and that thing was insane. It had the dual clutch S-tronic transmission, which was great, but again, at the end of the day, you got to buy a manual car. That's kind of why I stick to all manuals if I can. So this is probably, once I get out of the traffic here, you'll hear some more of the engine noise as I roll through the gears a bit. I'm going to flip lanes to get out of the way of this Camry here. So again, you'll probably hear some of the engine noise now. Once I get on it, let's see. It doesn't quite scream like how I want it, but right around 4,000 or 5,000 I think is where the engine sounds best. It's really great motor noise, and again, it's just insanely buttery. It revs so fast. The motor and the flywheel are so light, unlike anything else. It really is almost like a motorcycle. So it's great to rev through the gears. So we're just cruising down the Waldo grade, hoping that I won't hit a lot of traffic because the exhaust install, I was told from the manufacturer, it's about a 10-hour install, which I think is insane. Talked to a buddy of mine that owns a shop and just did a different Larini exhaust on a customer's R8. He said it took about 2 hours to get the bumper off, just given all the small nuts and fasteners. So I'm expecting it'll take me at least 2 hours, maybe 3 hours for that, and then again factor in another 2 to 3 to put it back on. So maybe 6 hours. It's a little after 6 o'clock, so I don't think I'm gonna be able to get it all done tonight, unfortunately, unless I work through the night. But given I have to go to my job in the morning and play adult, I'm gonna get half of it done today, and then slap it on tomorrow. Maybe I'll do a review then. So I found an open patch of road, semi-open at least, in traffic, and I want to give you guys a little taste of the motor. So we're in 6th gear at just under 80 miles an hour, and we're around 3,000 RPM. So if I get on it, it's kind of right, and it's a nice little hum range. Let's throw it down. You can hear that it's revving really, really fast. Again, this V10 is just nuts. I think it's the greatest motor, one of the top motors on the planet for sure. For GT V10, I think is one of the sexiest things of all time. That and Lexus LFA, but it's funny how pretty much every 10 out there besides the Viper is like my favorite motor. The Viper engine is just a pile of shit. I think it sounds absolute garbage. I know people say in the middle of the rev range it sounds a little bit better, but not a fan. Love Vipers, not a fan of the motor at all. Exhaust note is a big thing to me. Speaking of which, crappy exhaust. A lot of people do not like the M4 exhaust. Stock, I thought it was okay. Actually, when it's in warm-up mode and for the car, while when the engine's initially warming up, it'll run extra rich. Car sounds like a mini Ferrari because it's the inline 6 is essentially half a 12 and half of a V12, and it really, or inline 12 rather, it sounds really fucking good. But with the downpipes, I had full stock exhaust on that, but with the downpipes I put on it, it really sounded insane. So got rid of the primary cats in the system, and it just roared. A little farty in some areas, but for the most part, I thought it was a really good sounding car, just unique in a lot of ways. Was it this thing? No, not at all. But that is what you get for an extra $40,000+. So hopefully you can hear a little taste of the motor now. So I want to talk about buying a car like this. So obviously I bought it used. It's 4 years old. It only had 7,000 miles on it, and I was not planning to buy an R8. I was actually looking to sell my Ducati 899, sell my motorcycle, and buy a track car, which was ideally going to be a 2002 AP1 Honda S2000. Love that motor, love that car. I'm sure I'll want at some point. But I was looking to do kind of a straight trade because they're about the same cost, and just have a dedicated track car. Since I live in San Francisco, I don't really have room for cars, but I was planning to keep it up at my parents' place where a lot of my tools and things are. I have some room up in the North Bay of the Bay Area. People almost crashing. So I was originally looking for that, went down the fucking Craigslist rabbit hole, started looking at all sorts of shit, and came across an R8 that was located in the East Bay here. And I was like, I started looking at the price. I'm like, for a V10, it's not as bad as I thought. And as great as the Audi V8 is, I would never buy the R8 with the V8. I just don't think it does the car justice. And while 420 horsepower is a lot for most people, and once you've had a lot of 500 horsepower cars, you need to, or at least for me, you definitely want to kind of keep that going. And I love having big horsepower cars. They're a lot of fun. I'm very used to that now, so I feel like I can handle it pretty well, especially after several track days, etc. But back to the point, so I saw the pricing wasn't that crazy on them. I started doing a lot of research on eBay, looking at completed listings to see what they're selling for several months back, looking on Craigslist, looking on the Audi forum as well. R8 Talk is the major one there. And really just got an idea around what the market was like. And this car was literally about $10,000 under what it should be, given the mileage, given that it's a manual, it's a lot more rare. The color is kind of whatever. It's silver with a darker silver blade. It looks great, it's fine, but is it the best one out there? Probably not, it's just kind of standard. But that also means it's going to be easier to sell when I go to sell it in a year or two and move on to something else. Most likely going to be a house, unfortunately. I'm hoping to buy something and get a garage so I can actually buy and keep some more toys rather than just kind of interchange them. But yeah, the cost wasn't that bad, and I've been kind of rolling the equity from my old cars all the way from, I used to have a 350Z, sold that in college, bought a 370Z, had that for several years, bought a motorcycle, sold both of those, ended up buying the Z06 Corvette, had that for a couple of years, sold that. Then I was like, okay, you know what, I keep trading these cars, maybe I want to keep something longer term. What's a more well-rounded car that has back seats, since all of my cars have been two-seaters up until that point. And I came across the M4. So I'm not someone that's loyal to any one brand. I just love sports cars in general, and not just any car, but good sports cars in that matter. And wasn't really the biggest fan of the last BMWs in terms of the interior, like the E92. Great car, people love it, but just too old. I was coming from an 08 Z06, which had just very Spartan interior. Once the seats were replaced, great car. Obviously not the sexiest interior, but it got the job done. I don't really care. It was fast as fuck. That thing was insane. But I wanted something that had more modern technology, etc. So that's why I went with the BMW. I really love the newer iDrive setup. I know people used to think they were pieces of shit in the past, but the new one from, I think, 2014 onward, mine was the first M4, so 2015. But that new setup was incredible. It had a really great control, so you didn't have to take your eyes off the road at all. I didn't get for the heads-up display. I didn't opt for it because it was part of a $6,000 package that had a bunch of random nannies like parking assist and lane departure shit that I didn't need. It's kind of for old people, so it was like, would I want a heads-up display? Absolutely. I had it in the Corvette and I liked it, but is it worth $6,000? No. So that being said, really great technology in the M4, really loved it, but again, I kept flipping the equity between all my cars, and it just made sense. Since I bought the M4 new, again, I was thinking I was going to hold on to it for a long time, but then I started thinking, okay, if I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to need to sell this car and buy something cheaper anyway to get that equity out. So I said, hey, it's about a year old. I'm probably going to lose about another $5,000 holding on to it if I sell it in a year. So would I rather lose $5,000 and drive an M4, or would I rather buy a dope R8 that's used, put maybe 10, 15,000 miles on it in a year and a half or so, which is a lot for me. I usually drive 6,000 or 8,000 miles a year, and then just lose that potential money on this car. Or honestly, I think I might be even, and that's only because of the fucking used car tax bullshit that I had to pay. So obviously, if you're buying used, it's ideally a private party, trying to avoid some of the taxation, but it just blows my mind that you have to fucking pay tax on something that someone already else paid tax for. So I'm all about paying tax, but when it makes sense. Anyway, I paid used tax, so that really cut into my potential profit or loss in this case on the car, but I think I'll probably break even, maybe lose $5,000 in a year or two. So I thought that was the better option than continue to drive the M4. I'd rather drive an R8 for a while. It's been awesome. I don't need the attention, but it's you definitely get it. While it's subtle, people are definitely like looking and taking pictures because they're pretty rare. Like I live in the Bay Area where there's a lot of nice cars, but you mainly see Ferraris, Lamborghinis, a jillion Porsches. No one really thinks Porsches are all that sexy to look at, or they're not obviously rare, but great cars. Don't get me wrong, Porsches are probably some of my all-time favorite cars to drive, but not the sexiest thing versus like an R8, which I think is probably the pinnacle of one of the top cars in terms of car design. So yeah, you get attention, but sounds amazing. Gas mileage is pretty horrid. You get maybe 21 highway if you're babying it, but realistically, I'm seeing probably mid-teens with this thing. The Corvette and the M4 are actually pretty gas efficient. I drove from here again to Arizona. I got, I think, about 25, 26 on the highway, and I was cruising about 100 miles an hour, triple digits, pretty much the whole way out in the middle of nowhere. The Z06, you could easily get 28, maybe even 30 on the highway because it was just geared so high that 6th gear, double overdrive, when you're doing 80 or 90, I think it was like 1,800 RPMs. The motor was just barely working, whereas 80 miles an hour in this, you're spinning 3,100 RPMs. So it's going through gas a little bit more. Whatever, because the shit's fairly cheap right now. Anyway, loving the car so far. It's been maybe 3 or 4 weeks since I've had it, and really looking forward to getting the exhaust on. I wish I could do some other things like lower the car, get some new wheels. I have the stock V10 wheels, which they look pretty cool, but I would love to have the contrast and get a black wheel. It's just everything for this. You're paying the exotic car price tax of just absurd things. Like an exhaust on this car, they range from anywhere from $3,000 or $4,000 absolute minimum all the way up to $8,000–9,000, and you're literally paying for the same amount of metal and quality as you would with a car that you'd be paying maybe $12,000 to $2,000 for an exhaust. So that's absurd. I actually ended up working out a deal where I was going to do some promotion work for the exhaust I'm buying because I like it so much, and there was no great YouTube videos out there that would show the quality of the audio of that system. So I'm hoping to do that. But yeah, really looking forward to waking this thing up. Can't lower it because I'm in the city, unfortunately. I might buy the carbon fiber side blades just because they look badass, and if I go to sell the car, I can pop them off pretty easy and sell it. So I'm not trying to, I love modding cars, but I don't want to lose a ton of cash on everything that I buy. So I'm trying to be semi-reasonable about it. I'm sure that will change in the future, but in the meantime,